Shocking. Moment, Jimmy Kimmel. Cancels show after harsh comments about Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford didn't wait for Jimmy Kimmel to finish his question. Leaning forward, his gaze steady and sharp, he cut straight through the studio's polite atmosphere. Careful, according to whom Jimmy Ford's voice was low but carried unmistakable force. You a Twitter mob? Some boardroom executive looking for applause. I've been in this business before you were born. I've seen genuine accountability, and I've seen witch hunts disguised as moral crusades. The audience fell silent. What was supposed to be a light interview had shifted immediately. Jimmy Kimmel, usually quick with a retort, hesitated before smiling tightly. Harrison, we're just talking about basic human decency, right? Making sure people in the spotlight are mindful of what they say. Ford's expression didn't soften. Decency is one thing. Silencing people because you don't like their opinions is another. You're blurring that line deliberately. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kimmel leaned back, composing himself. Are you saying there shouldn't be consequences when celebrities promote harmful ideas? Shouldn't there be limits? Ford's response came without pause. And who gets to draw those limits, Jimmy? You, the corporate sponsors, Silicon Valley algorithms. The danger isn't in ideas, it's in censorship disguised as virtue. Kimmel's grin wavered. He glanced at the audience, searching for the usual shared chuckle, but the crowd was quiet, intrigued, tense. He regrouped quickly. Come on, Harrison. You've made your career playing heroes who stand for what's right. Isn't this the same thing? Calling out hate. Ford shook his head. No, Jimmy. My characters fought clear villains. This is different. You want to play judge, jury, and executioner over opinions that don't fit your worldview. That's not heroism. That's performance. The temperature in the room dropped. Camera operators instinctively zoomed closer, sensing they were capturing a moment unlike any other. Kimmel's tone sharpened. So you think we should give platforms to everyone no matter what they say? Ford leaned in further, his voice lower but unmistakably firm. I think we should let people speak and let ideas stand or fall on their own merit. I think conversation matters more than censorship. Kimmel sat back, his smile forced now. Some speech causes real harm, Harrison. Surely you agree there's a line. Ford's eyes narrowed. There's always a line, but it should be drawn carefully, thoughtfully. Not impulsively, not politically, not for applause. The audience watched enraptured. This wasn't a celebrity interview anymore, it was a debate live and raw. Kimmel's voice hardened. Are you saying cancel culture is a myth that people facing consequences for their words is somehow wrong? Ford didn't blink. I'm saying that destroying careers over mistakes or unpopular opinions without due process is wrong. I'm saying that fear has replaced dialogue, and that's dangerous. The air felt electric now. Crew members exchanged nervous glances. Producers whispered urgently in the control room, unsure whether to cut to commercial. But the cameras kept rolling. Ford straightened in his chair. You don't fight hate by shutting people up, Jimmy. You fight it by confronting bad ideas with better ones. You fight it by being willing to listen, not just preach. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Kimmel, visibly irritated, now leaned forward. Do you think there should be no accountability at all? No repercussions for harmful speech? Ford's reply was calm but unequivocal. There must be accountability, but it has to be fair. Proportionate. Decided by principles, not hashtags. Right now, it's a mob mentality pretending to be justice. As the segment neared its first break, the tension was palpable. Kimmel glanced at his notes, but seemed lost for words. His usual rhythm-sharp, funny in control was gone. Ford had seized the narrative. He looked out at the silent studio audience and added one final statement before the commercial cue. This is why people are losing faith in entertainment, Jimmy. Because they can see through the act. They know when they're being lectured instead of entertained, and they're tired of it. The audience remained hushed as the cameras faded to black. The cameras faded back in, and the tension in the studio was palpable. Kimmel, trying to regain his footing, forced a smile. All right, Harrison, he began with a brittle laugh. Let's lighten things up. You've played some of the most iconic characters in film history. Indiana Jones, Han Solo. Do you ever think those characters would survive in today's cultural climate, Ford? Fixed him with a level gaze. They wouldn't be written today, Jimmy, not the way we made them. They'd be sanitized, focus grouped, and drained of all the rough edges that made them real. The audience let out an audible murmur. Kimmel pounced. So you're saying there's no room for growth, for evolving past outdated ideas? Ford shook his head slightly. I'm saying there's a difference between growth and erasure. We should learn from history, not rewrite it. The atmosphere thickened again. Kimmel's eyes narrowed. Come on, Harrison. You're telling me you've never said something in your past that you regret. That wouldn't fly today, Ford offered a wry smile. Of course I have. Everyone has. The difference is I accept that. I don't pretend to be perfect, and I don't expect others to be either. The crowd clapped tentatively, unsure if it was appropriate. Kimmel leaned forward. But Harrison, don't you think that as a public figure your words carry more weight? Shouldn't there be higher standards for what you say? Ford met his gaze without blinking. Higher standards? Yes. Double standards? No. There's a difference. What worries me, Jimmy, is this trend where perfection is demanded, but forgiveness is denied. Kimmel nodded, acknowledging the point, but still pushing. It sounds like you're advocating for a free pass for offensive behavior. Ford shook his head, leaning forward slightly. No, I'm advocating for context, for proportionality, for remembering that people are complex and flawed, and that's what makes them human. The audience was dead silent again, hanging on every word. Kimmel's tone shifted to a sharper edge. So where do we draw the line, Harrison? What's acceptable and what isn't? Or should we just shrug our shoulders at everything? Ford's reply was immediate and firm. We draw the line where harm is clear and deliberate, not where feelings are hurt or opinions clash. Kimmel smirked. Easy to say when you're a beloved icon, isn't it? Ford gave a short, humorless laugh. Icon or not, the principle stands. Freedom means hearing things you don't like. Kimmel leaned back, clearly growing frustrated. Well, freedom also comes with consequences. Ford's eyes locked onto his. Consequences should be fair, not mob-driven, not dictated by trends. The crowd watched intently as Ford continued, his voice steady but passionate. We've created an environment where people are afraid to speak. That's not healthy, Jimmy. That's not the sign of a free society. Kimmel hesitated, then reached for his next question. But isn't it worth it if it protects marginalized communities from harm? Ford's tone softened just slightly but remained firm. Protection is vital. But we have to ask ourselves, are we protecting people or are we silencing debate? Those aren't the same thing. The back and forth felt more like a courtroom than a talk show now. Every line was sharp, every reply calculated. Kimmel, grasping at humor to break the tension, quipped, So what, Harrison? You're telling me we should go back to the old days, Wild West morality. Ford shook his head slowly. No, I'm saying we should move forward with wisdom, not with hysteria. The audience erupted into a rare, spontaneous applause. Even some crew members backstage nodded quietly. Kimmel's frustration became more visible. Sounds like you're defending people who've done real harm just because they're unpopular. Ford's reply was unwavering. No, Jimmy. I'm defending the principle that justice requires fairness, not popularity. The debate raged on, but it was clear to everyone in the room that Ford wasn't just defending himself, he was articulating something many felt, but few dared to say. The cameras swept over a captivated audience. Jimmy Kimmel straightened in his chair, his frustration barely concealed. Harrison, he began carefully, let's get specific. Do you think cancel culture has gone too far in holding people accountable for racism, sexism, and homophobia? Ford's expression didn't waver. I think we're too quick to use those labels to shut down conversation. Real hate needs to be called out, absolutely. But these days, disagreement itself is treated as hatred. That's a dangerous road. A ripple moved through the audience, a mixture of discomfort and agreement. Kimmel didn't back down. But surely you agree there are clear lines. When public figures promote harmful stereotypes, there should be pushback, right? Ford leaned forward, voice steady. Pushback. Yes, but punishment. Without dialogue, no. If we can't talk about tough issues, we won't solve them. Shaming people doesn't change minds, it hardens them. The tension escalated. Kimmel pushed harder. Some of your peers have faced consequences for things they said decades ago. Do you think those consequences were unfair? Ford didn't hesitate. In many cases, yes. Judging people by today's standards for things they said 30 years ago ignores context. It erases progress and denies redemption. The audience remained riveted. Kimmel's tone turned personal. So you'd defend friends who've crossed the line, you'd stand by them no matter what they said. Ford's voice lowered but carried weight. I'd stand by fairness, I'd stand by due process. That's different than excusing bad behavior. I believe in accountability, but not mob justice. Kimmel crossed his arms. Well, it sounds like you're defending privilege here. Ford's eyes narrowed. Privilege, Jimmy. Privilege is thinking you can define what's acceptable thought on any given night. Privilege is reducing serious issues to applause lines. A murmur swept the crowd. Some clapped quietly, others looked uneasy. Kimmel glanced at his cue cards, voice rising. Look, Harrison, people look up to you. Don't you think you have a responsibility to set the right example? Ford's reply was immediate. Yes, I do. And that's why I'm saying this. The example I set is one of honest dialogue, not conformity. Kimmel leaned forward, speaking quickly now. And what about misinformation, lies that hurt people? Are we supposed to just let those spread unchecked? Ford didn't blink. We fight misinformation with facts, with reason, not with censorship. You can't cure ignorance by silencing people, you cure it by educating them. The room felt electric, every word landing with precision. Kimmel's voice was almost pleading now. But there's real harm being done, Harrison. Don't you see that Ford softened slightly but stood firm? Of course there's harm, but rushing to condemn without listening won't heal anything. It just deepens divides. Kimmel sat back, exhaling. You're painting a romantic picture, Harrison, but we live in the real world. There are consequences for what people say. Ford met his gaze steadily. True. But the question is, who decides what deserves those consequences? That's the heart of this debate. A long pause followed. Then Ford continued, his voice quieter but still powerful. This is why trust is eroding in institutions and media, even in this very room. Because people sense they're being manipulated rather than informed. Kimmel looked down briefly, his usual poise slipping. The audience felt the shift. Ford didn't let up. And here's another truth, Jimmy. When entertainers become moral arbiters, when shows like this treat disagreement as sin, we stop being entertainers. We become enforcers. And that's not what this seat was built for. The crowd erupted into scattered applause again, some supportive, others hesitant. Ford leaned back, folding his arms. I came here tonight expecting a conversation. Instead, it's an interrogation. Kimmel sat frozen for a moment before replying softly, Maybe it's both, Harrison. Ford's answer was immediate. That's exactly the problem. The segment ended as the camera zoomed out slowly. The battle lines had been drawn clearly, Ford standing for dialogue and principles. Kimmel grasping to defend the modern ethos of accountability through public censure. As they cut to commercial, it was evident to everyone watching, whether in the studio or at home, that this wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a showdown of philosophies, and Ford was far from finished. The cameras came back from commercial, and the atmosphere in the studio was tense but electric. Jimmy Kimmel, visibly unsettled but determined, straightened in his chair. Harrison, he said, voice tight, you've made some strong points tonight. But let's be honest, isn't this just nostalgia? You're defending an old system that allowed certain people to say whatever they wanted without consequence. Ford's eyes locked onto Kimmel. Nostalgia for what, exactly, Jimmy? For a time when people could disagree without being cast out of polite society. That's not nostalgia. That's common sense. Kimmel smirked. But those disagreements often marginalized vulnerable communities. Isn't it better that we hold people accountable now? Ford leaned forward. Accountability and intolerance are not the same. What you're calling accountability is often a rush to judgment, not justice. There's no room for intent, context, or even growth. The audience sat frozen, watching this intellectual duel unfold. It no longer felt like a late-night interview. This was a cultural battle. Kimmel's tone sharpened. So, what's your solution, Harrison? Do nothing. Let anyone say anything without pushback. Ford's reply was calm but forceful. Of course not. But the solution isn't to silence people into submission, it's to engage, challenge, debate. And yes, sometimes forgive. The audience broke into applause again, louder this time, with a few cheers peppered throughout. Kimmel's frustration flared. It sounds like you're saying we should tolerate intolerance. Ford didn't hesitate. I'm saying we should recognize that intolerance can be found on all sides. The moment you declare your views above criticism, you become what you claim to oppose. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Some viewers shifted in their seats, clearly wrestling with the weight of Ford's words. Kimmel pressed on. Harrison, you have an enormous platform. Don't you think using it to call for understanding risks giving cover to dangerous ideologies? Ford shook his head slowly. No, because understanding isn't agreement. It's the first step toward finding solutions. Kimmel leaned in, voice lowering. You're aware that some people watching tonight will twist your words, they'll use them to justify real harm. Ford met his gaze, unwavering. That's a risk with every word spoken, Jimmy. The answer isn't to say nothing. It's to say what you believe clearly, honestly, and then defend it. Kimmel fell silent for a moment, caught off guard by the simplicity of the answer. Ford continued, his voice steady and resolute. The reason this conversation matters is because it's happening live, without filters, without scripts. And that's rare today. Too rare. The audience began clapping again, louder now, some even rising to their feet. Kimmel tried to regroup. So what would you say to critics who accuse you of defending outdated, harmful ideas under the guise of free speech? Ford responded without missing a beat. I'd say they're missing the point. The right to speak freely doesn't mean the right to avoid criticism, but it does mean the right to speak at all. We forget that at our peril. His words hung in the air, resonant and clear. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted yet again. Even the crew members could feel it. Ford wasn't just defending himself anymore, he was articulating something larger, a defense of discourse itself. Kimmel swallowed hard, visibly aware that he was losing control of the narrative. Well, Harrison, he said, finally, you certainly didn't come here to play nice tonight. Ford offered a faint smile. I didn't come here to play at all, Jimmy. I came here to talk. The crowd erupted into applause once more, some standing, others cheering. Even those who disagreed with Ford seemed to recognize the courage it took to say what he was saying. As the camera zoomed out again, Kimmel's expression was one of resignation mixed with respect. He knew this wasn't going the way he had intended, but he also knew this was television history in the making. Ford sat tall, arms folded, calm and composed. He wasn't just winning an argument, he was reclaiming something deeper. The right to speak, the right to dissent. The cameras returned once more, the audience buzzing with anticipation. Jimmy Kimmel, clearly trying to regain composure, forced a chuckle. Well, Harrison, you certainly know how to keep a crowd on the edge of their seats. Let's talk about responsibility. Isn't it fair to say that celebrities with their influence should speak carefully and avoid spreading views that can harm others? Ford leaned forward, voice steady but pointed. Responsibility isn't silence, Jimmy. It's honesty. You can't demand carefulness at the expense of courage. Kimmel's smile tightened, but words have weight. When public figures speak, people listen and act. Ford nodded slowly. Exactly. Which is why we must speak thoughtfully, not fearfully. Fearful speech isn't dialogue, it's self-censorship. The audience reacted with a mixture of applause and hushed whispers, the tension continuing to build. Kimmel pressed on, sensing Ford wasn't backing down. Isn't there a line, though? Where do we draw it? When do words become dangerous enough to merit consequence? Ford's gaze didn't waver. We draw it where harm is deliberate and real, not where opinions simply offend. If we criminalize discomfort, we destroy discourse itself. Kimmel's tone grew sharper. Some would say that allowing offensive speech enables hatred to fester unchecked. Ford replied, voice even but firm. Suppressing speech doesn't erase hatred, Jimmy. It drives it underground where it festers. Worse. A wave of applause broke from part of the audience while others remained silent, reflecting deeply. Kimmel shifted tactics. So what do we do? Just let people say whatever they want whenever they want. Is that really freedom? Ford's reply was immediate. Freedom is messy. It's uncomfortable. But it's essential. If we try to sanitize it, we lose it. The studio was electric. Viewers could feel the stakes had risen yet again. Kimmel's frustration edged into his next question. So you think cancel culture is just hysteria? Ford paused deliberately before responding. Cancel culture is fear pretending to be virtue. It's people punishing others to prove their own purity. That's not progress, Jimmy. That's theater. A spontaneous cheer erupted from several sections of the audience. Kimmel looked momentarily stunned but recovered quickly. You've played so many heroes on screen, Indiana Jones, Han Solo. Are you saying those characters would stand here and defend people who've said harmful things? Ford's answer was resolute. Those characters fought for freedom and truth. They didn't police opinions, they confronted ideas head on. That's real courage. Kimmel leaned back, searching for his next move. Harrison, don't you think there's a risk in what you're saying, that it sends a message of indifference to those harmed by words? Ford's expression softened, but his resolve remained. No. It sends a message that we trust people to think critically, that we don't treat them as fragile, that we trust them to engage and debate rather than demand silence. The audience again erupted into applause, louder this time. Kimmel's face flushed slightly, and his next words came faster, more emotional. It sounds to me like you are defending privilege, defending the ability to speak without consequence while others suffer. Ford's voice dropped to a calm but chilling quiet. Privilege is claiming the right to define what others can and cannot say. Privilege is thinking this desk gives you authority over speech itself. The crowd reacted audibly to that with some cheers and others murmuring. Ford continued, "You may disagree with me, and that's fine. That's good even. But disagreement isn't oppression. Debate isn't violence. We need to remember that." Kimmel was visibly unsettled, glancing at his notes, but finding no way to deflect. Ford leaned back slightly, taking in the crowd. The danger, Jimmy, isn't in people saying the wrong things. It's in silencing the right to say anything at all. The audience applauded again, many now standing fully engaged in the historic moment unfolding live. Kimmel's voice was quiet now, almost resigned. "You've made your point, Harrison." Strongly. Ford nodded. "It's not about winning a point, Jimmy. It's about keeping this space, this stage, this country open for conversation, open for all voices, even the ones we don't like." As the cameras resumed for what would be the last segment, the atmosphere was transformed. The tension remained thick, but there was now a quiet intensity, a sense that this was more than just an episode of late-night television. Kimmel spoke first, his tone cautious. "Harrison, clearly this conversation has struck a chord tonight. Let me ask, do you believe the media plays a role in this climate of outrage you're criticizing?" Ford nodded slowly. "Absolutely. Media amplifies outrage because outrage sells. Anger draws viewers, sparks clicks, generates headlines. It rewards shallow controversy instead of encouraging thoughtful discussion." A murmur rippled through the audience as Ford continued. "But there's a cost. When discourse becomes theater, trust erodes. People stop listening not just to each other, but to facts, to nuance, to truth itself." Kimmel leaned forward, almost pleading. "So, what's the solution then? How do we hold people accountable without falling into what you call mob justice?" Ford's reply was calm but unwavering. "By remembering that accountability isn't vengeance. It's fairness, context, proportion. It means listening before judging. It means offering a path to redemption, not just punishment." The studio was still the audience, hanging on every word. Kimmel tried again, this time more sincerely. "Harrison, some would say that language can itself be violence. Those words can do real harm. How do we reconcile that with your defense of free speech?" Ford's voice was steady but firm. "Words matter, yes, but they're not violence. We diminish real violence when we conflate it with offense. We have to toughen our discourse, not soften our definitions." The audience responded with soft applause, acknowledging the gravity of the point. Kimmel's face showed fatigue, but also respect. "You're not backing down tonight, are you?" Ford offered a small, almost wry smile. "No, Jimmy. I've seen too much to back down now." He glanced toward the audience. "These conversations matter, not because they're easy, but because they're hard. If we can't have them honestly in places like this, then where can we?" Kimmel nodded, visibly moved, but still struggling with the debate's weight. "And what's your hope, Harrison? After all this, what do you want the audience to take away?" Ford didn't hesitate. "I want them to remember that disagreement isn't a threat, that honest dialogue is a foundation, not a fault. That we can listen, challenge, even argue without destroying each other." A long silence followed, broken only by a slow, growing applause that spread throughout the studio. The audience rose, clapping not just for a celebrity, but for the substance of what had been said. Ford sat still, his expression calm content to let the applause speak. Kimmel, clearly humbled, offered his closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you agree or disagree with Harrison tonight, I think we can all agree it's rare to have a conversation this honest, this raw on this stage. He turned to Ford. Thank you for showing up. And for showing up in every sense of the word. Ford inclined his head slightly, his quiet dignity intact. Thanks for having me, Jimmy, even if it got a little messy. Kimmel laughed, genuinely this time. Messy's good. Messy's real. As the credits prepared to roll, Ford offered one last remark, looking directly into the camera. To the viewers at home, keep talking. Keep questioning. And don't let fear dictate your words or your thoughts. The final shot captured the two men shaking hands, an image both symbolic and sincere. The debate had been fierce, but mutual respect had survived. The audience's applause continued as the credits rolled, many still on their feet. And as the lights dimmed, the legacy of this conversation was already being felt. Clips would soon circulate online. Debates would ignite across social media. But for this night in the studio, what mattered was that two voices had been heard loudly, clearly, and without censorship. Harrison Ford waved to the audience one final time, and walked calmly off stage. Kimmel sat quietly for a moment, watching him go. Then as the last camera cut away, he whispered to himself that was something else. The audience had witnessed not just an interview, but a turning point, a moment where ideas clashed fiercely, but discourse had prevailed. And for that, they applauded long after the cameras stopped rolling.